Tapes done? Very well. Okay, thanks for making me now like an idiot. We're back, Magda! With Magda. So, are you, directly only? Magda! Magda, that's right, that's your name, sweetheart. That's right. All right, yeah, look at her, look how excited she is. What's your favorite? Magda? Yeah, that's your name. I know that, I don't need to ask that. Magda! Yeah, look at her, she's getting excited. She gets to see another one of her on the screen. Magda! What's your favorite part of the day? Magda? 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 What's your favorite? Magda? Hot Brett. What's your Magda? Brett. Here's the music video. Magda! All right. Magda, whatever this thing is. It's a clothing monster that someone has had me talking to. So, without further ado, we are going to be back after these messages. And this was brought to you by awkward script writing by... All right, on that note, we will be back. We will be back after these short messages. This was brought to you by Hair Products by Magda, and I'll be seeing you later. We'll be back. You enjoy whatever you paid your money to do. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the artist Brett Sylvia.
And this is a long, long time ago. And it takes place, actually, it's part of Russian folklore. It was an elderly couple, very old, and they lived on an island, a run-down little hovel back from the beach a ways in a clearing. And they had been there for years and years, broken down roof, no glass in the windows, little bench out front that they sat in that kind of sloped off to one side. You can imagine them sitting there. And every morning, the husband would go out fishing. He'd walk down to the beach, and he'd take his net and he'd cast it out over the waters. And as it would sink, he'd haul it in and he'd trap the fish in it. And he knew if he got a lot or a few fish. And every morning he came home with a few fish, and some they ate and some they sold for bread and other things they needed. And one morning, the husband goes down to the water and he casts his net, and as he pulls it in, it's heavier than it's ever been before. He's never had to work that hard. And he finally gets it to shore and realizes there's almost nothing in it. And he drags it up on the shore and he opens up the end, and lo and behold, there's one gold fish in there. And he figures, well, it's all I've got, but I'll take it home. And as he starts to pick the fish up, the fish turns its head and looks at him and says, "Oh, don't take me." And fisherman looks at him and says, "What?" He says, "Well, don't take me, please. I belong in the sea. You have to leave me in the sea." And the man is still getting over this fish talking to him, this gold fish. And the fish says to him, "Well, I'll tell you, if you will let me go back to the sea where I belong, I will give you whatever you need. All you need to do is ask." And the man says, "Oh, no, you want to be back, I'll send you, I'll put you back, and I don't need anything, that's quite all right." And back home he goes, and of course he gets home, and empty net, no fish, and so on. And the wife looks at him and says, how dare you come back with no fish? What will we eat? How will we buy bread? How will we buy anything else? You have to get fish. And he tells her the story of what happened at the beach. And she looks at him and says, and you asked him for nothing? And he says, well, the fish needed to be back in the sea, so I let him have his freedom. And she says, you go back there right now, and you tell that fish that we need bread. And the old man goes back to the edge of the shore, and he calls out, and this is where you have to help me. It is, goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea. If you'll help me. Goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea. Oh, come on. Fish isn't going to hear that. Goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea. Well, thank you. That did it. The fish came along and it stood up and looked at him. And what is it, old man? And the old man looked at the fish and says, my wife wants bread. We need bread. And the fish said, it is done. Go home. And the fish swims off and he goes back home and he gets to the house. The whole kitchen is filled with fresh loaves of bread. And he says, wonderful. And she says, what do you mean wonderful? Why, the trough is broken. I can't put water in it to do the wash. You go back to that fish and you get a trough from me. Well, the old man starts off, and just as he's getting to the edge of the clearing where they live, she says, oh, and the bench, get the bench fixed. So down to the shore he goes, and he calls once again, goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea. And there comes the fish and takes one look at him and says, what is it, old man? And the old man tells him, well, my wife needs a trough to do the laundry. The old one leaks. And the bench is broken and she wants a nice straight one. And he looks at him and he says, it is done. Trust in God. Go back. So he goes home and lo and behold, brand new trough and brand new bench. Well, the next morning, he's about to go fishing, and she says, look, forget those fish. I want you to go back there, and I want you to get that fish to give us a fine home. I want a good home to live in. And the man says, well, that's asking a lot, isn't it? She says, no, it isn't. It's what we deserve for all we put up with. Well, the man goes to the edge of the sea, and he calls out, goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea. And the goldfish comes along and stands up and looks at him. What is it now, old man? And the old man explains his wife wants a fine home. Goldfish says, trusting God, it is done, go home. Home he gets, and as he comes into the clearing, he sees a beautiful home. It was really a dacha, a real summer home. Wood, carved cornices on everything. Beautiful oaken home. And he walks in, and his wife is just so happy. She's running around. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous home. And he thinks, well, at least she'll be satisfied now. And the next morning, and he gets up, and he's about to leave. And you know, the wife looked at him and said, today, what I want is I want fine clothing. I want to look like a gentlewoman. Well, down to the shore he goes. Goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea. And the goldfish arrives and looks at him. Now what is it, old man? And the old man tells him what the wife wants. And goldfish looks at him and says, and I'll throw some in for you too. Go home. The man gets home, and sure enough, the house is filled with gorgeous clothing, both for his wife and for him. Oh, hers is a lot fancier than his, but his is very nice clothing. And he figures, okay, maybe tomorrow I can go back to catching food. And the next morning comes, and as he's about to leave, his wife looks at him and says, you know, I think we deserve more. Here we are, peasants living in this beautiful home. I want to be the governor of the province. And the husband looks at her. She says, I want to be governor of the province. Now you go. Well, he goes down to the sea. And goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea. He's going to stop coming if you don't help me. You know, let's try it again. Goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea. And he heard you. Thank you. And back up comes the fish. Now what, old man? And the old man tells him that the wife wishes to be a governess of the province and everything that goes with it. Fish looks at him and says, "Oh, it'll be done. Trust in God. Go away, old man." The old man goes home. And he gets there and he comes into the clearing. All of a sudden, there's a granite home. And there are armed guards at the door. And there are people walking in. "Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes, governor. Yes, governor." And as he comes in the door, she looks at him. And of course, he's wearing his fishing clothes. And she says, "What are you doing in here like that?" And he says, "Well, I live here. This is what I wear to go fish." She said, "Get out of here. Go to the back. Go to the kitchen or something." And she kind of throws him out of the house. And he, he spends his time back there. And the next morning comes, and as he's about to leave the house, sure enough, the wife stops him and says, "I'm not happy being a governor. Oh, people bow to me and curtsy to me and ask for my rulings, but I need to be more. I need to be a queen." Well, he looks at her, draws a deep breath, and goes down to the shore. And he gets to the shore, and he calls out, "Goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea." And the goldfish comes. And the goldfish gets there, and he says, "Now what, old man?" Well, the wife, again, wants to be, this time, queen. And he says to him, the fish says to him, "A queen? Yes, a queen, with all that goes with it." And the fish says, "It is done, old man. Trust in God and go home." The fish swims off, and when he gets back to the clearing, there's no more clearing. There are huge fields there, and there's a giant white marble palace. And as he looks, he sees troops marching back and forth in front on parade, and a troop of horsemen going around in back, and standing on the balcony are two generals. And his wife comes walking out in the midst of them, wearing absolutely queenly garments and a tiara. And this is phenomenal. And he goes into the house, and when he gets into the foyer, why, she's come downstairs already, and she says, "What are you doing in here, dirty old man?" And he says, "I'm your husband." She says, "Look, you go out," and motions to two of the guards and says, "You take them out in the backyard, and you have them sweep between here and the barn. That's what, you have them sweep back there. I don't want to see that thing." And so he's banished to the back, and everybody is bowing and everything, and the boyars are paying obeisance to her, and the lords are, and everybody is just treating her like a queen. Well, a long time goes by, and he hasn't been fishing. There's plenty of food. But one day she says, "Find my husband," to her courtiers. And they say, "You're what?" She says, "My husband, the little old man who used to be here." They say, "Well, we didn't even know you had a husband. Where would he be?" She says, "I don't know. Go find him." And they look high and they look low and they look around. And finally, somebody encounters an old servant from the kitchen who remembers the old man that was banished to sweeping between the house and the barn. And maybe he's there, and sure enough, they find him there. And they drag him up to the queen's throne and pluck him on his knees. And he says, "Yes, my dear, what is it?" She says, "I am tired of being a queen. It is not enough for me. I wish to be empress and rule over not only everybody of the land, but I also wish to rule over the creatures of the sea and of all the world. Go make me an empress." He draws a deep breath and gets back up on his feet and goes out the front door and down to the shore, shaking his head. And he calls out, "Goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Please stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea." And I can't hear you, so the goldfish probably can't because he doesn't come. So let's try it again. And it's, "Goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea." And the goldfish doesn't show up. And then he says again, louder, "Goldfish, goldfish, come to me. Stand with your head to the shore and your tail to the sea." And all of a sudden, the sea begins to roil, and waves begin to grow, and the sky begins to darken overhead, and lightning is flashing down, and there is no goldfish. The goldfish doesn't show up at all, as loudly or as often as he repeats the call. And so he gives up, and he goes home. And when he gets back to the clearing, he finds the old hovel with the broken bench and the leaking trough, and an old lady in raggedy clothes, his wife, sitting in front of it. Thank you. That's a Russian tale that was fortunately saved. In Russia, the countries in that region, the people were not literate. They didn't write. The only people who wrote were the clergy. And the church had all the language, and these people just heard everything. And as a result, because folk tales were beneath the dignity of the church, the folk tales were not collected until late. And a particular scholar, well, actually, there were two different British dentists who went to Russia on vacation at different times, and I think one had heard about the other's work. And they collected some of the tales, got back to Europe, and published very small manuals of them. But a man by the name of Afanasyev, a Russian scholar, collected a book of Russian folk tales. It is about yay thick, and if you ever find it, it's got almost all of them, whether it's that or it's about the princesses, or holy cow, wonderful lady whose name just fell out of my mind. It'll come back. Oh, Annalisa. And then all of those tales were finally collected. And of course, Baba Yaga, the Wicked Witch. I want to close with a story that's local. And this goes back to the early 1900s. And of course, the schooners were the way. That's how we delivered freight. That's how we did almost everything except the long haul stuff with the square riggers. And one day, a fishing boat out of the Gloucester area, the schooner, was out on the banks, and they were coming home after having fished for a couple of weeks. They were icing the fish. And they had a pretty good load of fish on. And as they sailed, they'd left about dawn from the fishing grounds, and there were no other boats in sight, and they were getting ahead of the fleet. They were going to be first in with their catch. That'll certainly give them a good price, say they. And as they're sailing, everybody's below decks. That fishing is extremely hard work. And most of the men are below decks, one man on the helm. And as he's sailing along, he sees something off to leeward, away from the wind. He sees something off to leeward, and there, he can't tell what it is, but it's moving in the water. So just then the cook comes on board to throw some scraps overboard, and when he does, the guy says, "What do you see there?" And the cook goes up a couple of rungs on the ratlins into the rigging, and he says, "I don't know what it is, but it looks like a log, but it looks like it's swimming." And so they call the captain, and he says, "Well, fall off and go down to it. Let's see what it is." And they get there, and it's a black lab. I'm sorry, a black Newfie, a Newfoundland dog, swimming in the water. They're 300 miles from anywhere. And there hasn't been a ship in sight for the last 4 or 5 hours. And here's this Newfie swimming. So they picked the dog up. It obviously had come from a vessel. They didn't know how or where, because it knew exactly where to go. And first it greeted them all by shaking itself dry. And Newfies hold a lot of water in their coat. And they finished with that. He finished with that. And then they knew he really was a ship's dog. Right to the galley. Boom. Begged some food from the cook and lay down next to the stove to get warm again, because that water's cold. They got to shore, and when they did come in, one of the things they did was they told everybody about the dog. And did anybody know about it? Whose dog was it? Anybody heard anything about it? I mean, this is almost a miracle. This dog appears in the middle of nowhere. And nobody had, and they were a few days getting refit to go out to sea again. And as they got ready to go to sea, the dog had been on the shore, and a couple of people had been feeding it and so on. It went to somebody's home, and they took care of it. When the boat got ready to leave, the dog came along, came running down to the boat and joined them again. So out they went, and while they were out, the local newspaper published an article about this found dog and got no response. So they were out when they came back from the trip. Again, the same thing repeated itself. And by now, the newspaper articles are going up and down the coast, as far south as Cape May, New Jersey, and as far north as all the way into Newfoundland. And nobody is looking for a Newfie that's missing. Nobody knows anything about the story. And these folks the men on the boat have kind of adopted the dog, but the dog adopts the town. And the dog goes to one home for one night and another home for another night and sleeps there and so on, and everybody feeds him. So he becomes the town's dog as well as the ship's dog. And every time they're ready to go to sea, as they're waiting for the tide to shift so they can go out on the tide, the dog shows up, comes running down the pier, leaps aboard, and off they go that half day. And they would go out and, of course, come back after a few weeks of fishing, and the same thing goes on, time and time again, until one day they're getting ready to go out, and the dog is a little bit late, and then it shows up at the head of the pier and comes running down the pier and halts short of the edge of the pier and barks at them, bark, 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 bark. And they're urging, come on, get aboard, we gotta go, come on. And the dog won't get on, just barks at them, runs back a ways, turns its head over his shoulder and barks and barks and barks at them, and does that 2 or 3 times. And finally, the captain says, we have to drop the lines, we have to go or we'll miss the tide. They give one last holler to the dog, who doesn't come aboard. Off they go, never to be seen again. Well, this story was in Yankee magazine in 1957, and July, to be exact. And in August, they published a letter they had received. For you see, the story I've just told you is true. And the letter they received was from a man who said, oh my God, I'm so happy to see the story, sorry for the schooner, but that was my dog and I never knew what happened. When he was little, turn of the century, his father had given him a Newfie. And the Newfie, well, if you've ever known them, they love people. And this Newfie would live in their yard, and they had a picket fence on the street side, and there was a school just a few doors down. And as the children would walk by going to school, the Newfies, who just loved the idea, this Newfie wanted to meet them all and greet them all. It would run up to the fence and would bark at them, barkity, barkity, barkity. You ever been barked at by a Newfie? Particularly if you're a little kid, right? I mean, it's enough to knock you over. And of course, he's on the other side of the fence. And the kids were frightened until finally the parents asked the boy's father to do something about it. So the father explained to the boy why they had to do something about it, and they gave the dog to the boy's uncle, who ran a coaster, a schooner that carried freight. And he sailed with them for several years, and then one year, it was summertime, and the boat was old. They decided one last trip, and then they were just going to let it go to the knackers. And so off they go. The boy's father goes with the uncle, and it's a very old boat. They go to Central America, and they take on a load of ore. And it's this stuff, as you sail and bounce on the sea, packs down tighter and tighter, puts a tremendous strain on the hull. And this is an old schooner. They're having to pump every day and such. And as they're coming home, they got off the coast of New England, coming back from Central America, and they encountered a terrific storm. And in the course of the storm, a wave came and swept the dog overboard. Now, normally you just, you turn the boat around, you come about, you jibe, whatever you can do, and go back and pick up the dog. But they realized that the boat was so old, making water so badly, it was so loose and everything, that if they tried to come over, they probably would break up the boat and lose everyone. So they left the dog behind. And so writes the man, thank you for letting me know what happened to my dog. I called Yankee magazine before I started using this story, and I asked them 2 things. One, had they verified it? And yes, they had. So what I've told you about the dog is absolutely true. How that dog knew not to get on board for that trip, nobody ever did solve. Haven't you ever wondered why there are no turtles in New York? Oh my. You're not, you gotta be more curious than that. Here's the story. This is what really happened. You see, many, many years ago, before the city got so dense that it retained its heat all winter, the pigeons used to fly down to the Caribbean for the winter. And they'd come back in the spring. And while they were there, and as you all know from childhood on up, animals can talk to each other. They don't talk with us, but they can talk to each other. And what happened was the pigeons every year going down, well, they knew the turtles and they talked with them and the other critters there. And there was one turtle who just got enthralled with their stories of the city and wanted to see New York. And so he made friends with one of the pigeons, and the pigeon said, well, I can't get you to New York. And the turtle said, there's got to be a way. And one day the pigeon comes into the place where the turtle lives and says, I figured it out. Go get a stick. Oh, about this long. And the turtle goes into the woods and comes out with a stick in its beak. And the pigeon says, perfect. Now you hang on to that as tightly as you can. And goes the turtle. And the pigeon grabs the other end and starts to flap his wings. And he kind of gets the turtle up a little bit. And he says, okay, tomorrow we're going to try it again. And for weeks on end, they practice until finally the pigeon's gotten strong enough from the exercise, he can actually lift the stick with the turtle on it. And they fly in circles for a couple of hours, so the pigeon figures they've got it all down just right. And so comes the day of going back to New York. And the pigeon comes into the clearing, lands, and the turtle comes out with the stick and clomps onto it, and the pigeon grabs it and starts flying up, and he circles, and he circles, and he circles, and finally gets high enough to start to New York with all the other pigeons. Now, you know, they made friends with the animals all winter, and so what happens is, as they're flying out over the beach, all the animals are there waving goodbye, 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 and the turtle decides he's going to, oh, goodbye! Well, so much for holding on to the stick. And that's why there are no turtles in New York City. Thank you very much.
So, you know, these guys are students, just like me, just like some of you out there. So thank you guys for coming. You know, performances have been great. Chuck did a great job. Let's hear it for Chuck. Let's hear it for Henry. Savin. Very good. Let's hear it for Jerry Linden. An awesome job. My Russian girlfriend. And then let's hear it for Magda. Okay. Thank you guys. And let's hear it for everyone that's actually helped out with this. This was not easy to do. I just wish that more people could have appreciated this sculpture and you know, all the artwork that's up here. These are from students over at UMass Dartmouth, the Star Source students, supporting local artists. That's what I'm about. I think that's what everyone here is about, just supporting the local artists. Thank you guys all again. I just want to verify what's going on with this sperm whale. This is actually a puppet. I have a lot of work to do on it. This is a fundraiser to gain more funds, so that way this is actually going to be able to be performed. There's a lot that still needs to be done with this skeleton. We had a Kickstarter, and we raised $786, which is great. We hit our goal. Thank you. And now we had a little fundraiser to try to get a little bit more money, so that way it can actually come together. So hopefully, you know, hopefully this will work. So I want to thank all of you who have come here, spend the $10 to get in, and you know, actually we were able to get this. Yeah, a round of applause for you guys out there. So thank you. It's really hard to break into this industry of performing arts and visual arts all at the same time. It's performing arts is a fine art. Puppetry is one of the oldest art forms on the planet, and I think it's important for us to understand that, and it didn't stop with Jim Henson's death. He's the one that kind of capitalized and understood how puppetry works on the television screen. But you know, I think it's time to move forward and kind of continue his legacy in many, many different ways. So this beautiful creature right here, this is going to be a glorified, I call it a glorified rod puppet. It's going to take about 8 to 10 people to perform it. If anyone's interested here, anyone at all interested in auditioning to be a puppeteer, to hold a rod to bring life to this, please feel free to do so. There is a sign-up sheet over at the desk when you enter. So the rods will be strategically placed throughout the vertebrae here. The fins, I have to work on the fins still to make them rigid enough to actually move. The head I have to cut back on some foam, and this thing will be done no matter what. I'm determined this will be done by July 5th, but June is the day that it's going to be performed in practice at the Whaling Museum. So that's coming up, and it will happen. So it's the June 12th. It's AHA for June. It's going to be right in the front of the Whaling Museum, in that open area in the front there. So, you know, feel free to come to that event. That one, it's going to be an interesting one. So I'm going to be working hard on this. Whatever money I have, I'm scraping it together, finishing off the whale, fixing the spine, and getting this thing to be performed for the city of New Bedford. So a little bit of luck and some help, this thing's going to happen. It's actually going to fly. So thank you all again for coming, and much appreciated. Thank you.